Hello, hello. We are so live on a Wednesday evening, and I'm so excited to be here. We are pretty much all alone, just me. We're going to be doing a Q&A today, and for the first maybe 5 or 10 minutes or so, I just kind of want to have a little bit of a monologue with you guys about something that I think is really important to consider in a crazy market like this. So while we're chatting about that, people will file in and feel free to add any questions you might have. And it can be on any topic. We can talk about card values, again, vending, investing, grading, flipping, collecting, anything that you guys want to talk about. Feel free to just throw any questions here in the chat and I'll star them as we go along here. But I wanted to bring up kind of one topic at the beginning as we get things kicked off, and that is this interesting kind of like dilemma that you go through as a collector who's been involved even for just maybe a year or so. Like, let's say you got into the Pokemon hobby a year ago and you were someone who was like actively going after a specific collection goal. You were hoping to maybe do a master set or, reconnect with some of those cards from your past or something like that. And you just kind of started to buy things. You were acquiring things, maybe you're ripping packs, but, I guess I'm mostly talking about people who were buying some of the chase cards or, buying some of the graded PSA 10 copies of things. And what you've been going through over the last 12 months, despite a little bit of a dip between October and December in the value of your stuff, is just kind of a full upward and to the right trajectory on the value of everything, almost everything across the board, especially vintage, mid-era stuff that's just a little bit more rare than the modern cards. And the dilemma that you kind of come to is, if you have any sort of like sentimental value about your items, when we're in a time like this where things are reaching all-time highs, like week after week, we're seeing record sales. What do you do about that? Do you try to take advantage somehow and get out while the getting is good? If your perception is that like we're kind of in a bubble or at the peak or whatever it may be, or do you try to, just try to ignore that, the kind of pressure or the inevitable feeling that like, oh, I could like get out of this item right now and it would be a big financial come up for me. And there's that dilemma if you really care about your stuff and it's not just some sort of like speculation money play, because either you sell something and it continues to go up in value and you just will possibly, at least not in the short term, have any sort of opportunity to reacquire that item for even close to the same price that you sold it for. Or, it'll go down and then you might be able to rebuy it at some point, but then you're buying something that is kind of actively depreciating. And that idea in investing is called trying to catch a falling knife. And it just is like, there's a reason why people typically don't go after the things that are going down in price, is because you feel like once you buy it, it's going to continue to go down in price. And that just is kind of scary. So the thing that really irks me the most is I can't answer this question of, let's say I got something for $100 and now it's worth $500. Do I sell that thing because it's 5x'd, or do I keep it because I'll never be able to acquire it again at that same low price point that I got it back in the day? And that is the question that I want to pose to you guys. And obviously it's going to vary. It depends on your situation, depends on the specific item. Maybe you have duplicates, all that kind of stuff are variables. But, for those rare things that you only have one of, and maybe maybe it's rare enough that maybe you'll never get it again. Do you sell and try to just kind of emotionally detach from it, or do you keep it and just realize that you'll never be able to get it back again at that same price point? So I just wanted to kind of pose that question to you guys as we let people filter in here and start asking some questions. Thank you so much for being here. We are so live. We're live on a Wednesday evening. There's no Riki today. He is working on a busy work week and some cool life changes he is working on. And we'll be back next week with a really awesome guest. This week, we're just going to do this Q&A. So start throwing questions into the chat, guys. And I'll get them started and see if we can answer some questions. Does that sound okay? All right, let's scroll down here and take a look. First question. What do you think of the Scream Psyduck PSA 10 value hitting 10K? I mean, actually, let me share my screen here. It's funny you asked that because before I got onto the stream, I kind of pulled up a couple of tabs that we might refer to while we're live and doing the Q&A. So if you guys can see here, I'm looking at a sales listing. I just posted about this sales listing on my Instagram, this Crystal Nidoking that sold in a PSA 10. Z&G Emporium, if you don't know, they're one of the most prolific trading card auction houses on eBay. And so a lot of like the comps for cards that you're going to see when you're, looking at different platforms like Alt or Card Ladder or Double Hollow or whatever you may be using are going to be coming from eBay, specifically from the Z&G Emporium store. So many of them sell through here. And so this specific listing on the Nidoking was a buy it now. It wasn't actually an auction. They just had Crystal Nidoking PSA 10 listed for $17,500 when the last public sale was for this card was like back in like September, October, something like that of last year. And it went for like 8,000 or like somewhere between 8 and 9,000, if I remember right. And so this listing sat for, I don't know, a handful of weeks. And I had a copy. I have a copy of this Nidoking, and we've had it at the table for a couple of months now. And every time we've had it at the show, we've gotten tons of people who are interested in it. But like, it was priced above the last sale because I thought it was worth more. And it finally just had a public comp. And so, I mean, this is honestly kind of in the same vein a little bit as that Scream Psyduck. We're seeing like the premier cards just hit all-time highs and level up and level up. So what do I think about it? I think that it's a really popular character, a really iconic artwork, and it's in the most liquid grade possible, which is a PSA 10. So I'm not surprised that it keeps hitting new highs. Now, the one additional caveat here with the Scream Psyduck is that it's a Japanese card. And there are definitely some significant impacts on Japanese cards and their values because foreign markets, are going to be much more involved in them than maybe some of the English cards. So I don't know as much about that side of it. I don't deal as much in Japanese as some people. But once again, what I think about the Scream Psyduck hitting 10K is that next time you go to a show or you're following somebody on Instagram who's trying to sell one, most likely they're going to have it priced well above 10K. Next question. What do you think of 151 singles? Yeah, I'm not surprised that they're going up. Like 151's about to go out of rotation in like next month. And obviously there's no guarantees, but I would be extremely surprised if like the Pokemon Company is printing any more 151 for the rest of forever. I'd be surprised if any type of product, if they are printing more of it actively, because there's just so many other sets that need to have print before you go all the way back to 151. So that kind of feeling, that kind of maybe a little bit of FOMO has entered the market. People won't be able to pull them out of packs as cheaply because the packs are going up. They're less plentiful. And let's be honest, guys, like just because they're very, they're artworks that we've kind of become accustomed to for the past few years, that doesn't make them any less awesome. Like all three of the starters having illustration rares and SIRs for the top evolution, all of the cards being original 151 from the Kanto region. Like it's an iconic set. And I'm pretty sure in one of the, maybe a couple of the elite forecasts that Riki and I have done in the past, I estimated that 151 packs were going to get to like $20 by April. And like, here we are basically. Obviously there's so many things that impact that value, but yeah, they keep ticking up, and it's one of the most popular sets of all time. I when I was getting more serious about vending, so many people were telling me that they got into the hobby because of Scarlet and Violet 151. So not surprised at all. Question: do you think Pokemon cards will ever not be scalped at stores so my son can get cards? Beard O'Malley, I don't know the answer to that. I would estimate yes. I mean, it seems like the Pokemon Company has intentions to expand production in the future. They've acquired a big printing facility, or they're building one, and that's going to be online in a couple of years. So I think they're trying to scale to meet demand. I hope so. I love the idea of there being cards available at retail. But just remember that in order for that to happen, it's not just that the scalpers would have to be disinterested, right? So like we're talking about right now, scalpers might be interested because there's such a difference between retail price and secondary market price immediately after release. But in order for shelves to be stocked, like stocked after any time after the first day that they get restocked, the secondary market has to come all the way down to below MSRP, because there's enough collectors out there that are interested in the items as well, like yourself and your son included. If the if the shelves are stocked with items that you feel are worth spending the money on, then you're going to buy it, right? And there's going to be thousands and thousands of people just like you who want to get access to it. So we're talking about supply has to outshine demand by so much that it comes below MSRP on the secondary market value, at least at release and for some period of time afterwards. And because like I know that it can feel like that all the cards are just going to scalpers, but when you look at these online queues and some of the information that you're seeing when people, or when they do drops on the Pokemon Center, it's like hundreds of thousands of people are in the queue waiting to get to the landing page to buy one or two boxes. And like, I don't know the exact logistics of whether or not, each one of those could potentially be a bot, but I'm guessing that many, many hundreds of thousands of those people are actual people, individual collectors, people who maybe want to open it and rip it, or people who want to buy one or want to buy two and then sell one and keep one so they can, kind of have one in the collection, but then not have to have an initial price in, the initial cost of that box can be reduced by the fact that you've sold one for a little bit above what you paid for the other one. Like there's so many scenarios that mean that people are going to be buying as much as they can get their hands on. Do you think 151 cards sealed and slabs are going to keep pumping? Well, the tough thing about this is there is enough supply out there that even if they go up like they have been, all it takes is it will never be as fast as like some of the vintage stuff, because there's enough people out there who have the Charizard from 151 that, like, let's say, I think it's basically at like the $1,500 mark right now. Well, there's enough people out there that have it, or enough people who like just got one back from grading or whatever, that are willing to sell it for less than the all-time high. And as frequently as that happens, there's new comps that come up that are slightly less than the all-time high. And so it kind of does this like little jagged move upwards over time. And I think that it could continue to go, but the supply is high enough for those cards that it will probably be slow and then could very easily correct, because it's a very heavily traded market because there's so many of them. Vintage is a little different because like it's probably going to take, when the market is strong, it'll take big leaps up quickly, because I mean, the Nidoking is a perfect example. There's only like 100 of them or so in a PSA 10. And so one sells for 8,000 and then another one doesn't come to market until Z&G puts up this one for 17.5, at least not publicly on all of these platforms that we are using to aggregate comp data. And so because it's been 4 or 5 months and the market has moved and enough people have been wanting to get that Nidoking who haven't been able to get the chance to, and you know, they're willing to pay that tip top price. And then who knows, the next one, I mean, there might be only one available left and maybe they have it priced at 25,000, you know? And so like it can take big leaps up, but it can also take big leaps down. So 151, much more heavily traded, so it'll move, I would say, a little slower than some of the vintage stuff as far as like drastic increases. Question: I'd love to hear about your journey as a collector and how that's changed over the years. What did you use to value? What did you used to value, and what do you value now? And for the longer term from here, you know, I collect in a very similar way to how I did years ago. You know, when I got like re-interested in Pokemon cards, obviously I went through that phase of just opening tons and tons of packs because it's so fun and you can kind of like have that exciting release day feel with other people and your peers and your siblings and stuff like that. But as far as like how I was collecting, I was working on like specific binders and like have like little goals with them. So my first ever like goal was to get one, to do like a Pokedex binder from 1 to 151. And it didn't necessarily matter like which generation those cards came from. I had a preference that they were like vintage, not like modern and bulk cards. And so I was looking for stuff, but like some of those cards were from Diamond and Pearl, from Gen 3. Some of those cards, you know, obviously were base set cards and gym cards. And I really didn't know what I was looking at. I didn't know the difference between like a base set and a jungle and a fossil back then. I didn't know what to look for. But the way that I was collecting was kind of the same. Like it's very completion oriented. That's how my brain works. And I'm still doing that. As you know, like one of my main goals for this year is to finish up my e-reader binder. And that's a master set of Expedition, Aquapolis, and Skyridge that's in one binder. And I'm approaching it in a very similar way to how I did with my base set stuff back in the day. So what did I used to value that I no longer value? Oh, man. Actually, one thing that has changed, when I was getting back into collecting, I did gravitate towards sealed stuff. I love having sealed items. You know, the idea of them like going up in value over time wasn't really in my mind, but like how they look when they were displayed and that kind of fun little like voice in the back of your head that knows that there's like sealed packs in there and you don't know what's in there and it could be something really cool, but it's just kind of like a delayed gratification for a long period of time as you have sealed boxes on your shelf. I loved that, but I actually really didn't like booster boxes back then because I didn't think that they displayed as well as Elite Trainer boxes. And back then I didn't know that Elite Trainer boxes started in like the end of Gen 5 and there's only been ETBs from then until now. So there weren't any ETBs, you know, for Diamond and Pearl or, you know, those other generations. I didn't know that. And so I was trying to collect a bunch of ETBs because I thought they looked so good on the shelf. And I still like to get a handful of ETBs, but like as far as sealed stuff, I'm much more inclined to pick up a booster box now these days than an ETB. So good question. What's up, guys? Shout out Chris for the super chat. Better catalog, Zeppelin or Black Sabbath? It's Led Zeppelin, and it's not close. They're the best rock and roll band ever in the history of the human race. Are you into Bitcoin at all? No, I'm not into cryptocurrencies at all. I think something about my personality is that I value like the physical item a lot more than like a digital item. I understand that there's like, exclusivity and value appreciation, and there's like utility in some of these coins and tokens and stuff. And there's like business ideas and whatever that can go into them and be built on top of their platform. But it's just, it never really interested me personally. And just the fact that I'm drawn towards all of this stuff, I think is kind of a representation of me being more interested in physical stuff that I can, see and touch and trade and talk about and that kind of stuff. All right. Just collect what you love and you can't go wrong. Amen. Shout out to our friend Earn Collects. Follow him on YouTube if you don't already. But he has a saying that I totally agree with, which is collectors get paid. And what he means by that is if you just kind of buy the things that you're interested in over time, they tend to go up in value. And your kind of emotional connection to them keeps them, in your inventory or in your portfolio or in your collection or whatever. And that means that you're not like selling them at every chance of increase in value. You like them enough that you keep holding on to them until at some point they're so valuable that you can't justify keeping them, or you just kind of fall out of love with them comparatively. And so you decide, okay, it's time to move on. And I've done that for some things before. I've done that for some things and then reacquired them at higher price points just because I really liked them and regretted selling them. We've all gone through that, I think. You and Dan should join live streams. Dan and Riki and we did a live stream 2 weeks ago. Is that what you mean? I sold my PSA 10 Ancient Mew at Card Party. I regret not just keeping it. I thought it would drop in the rest of the market in the short term, but it never did. Yep, I've been there, especially for vintage cards. Any vintage card that I really liked and I decided to sell, I don't regret all of them, but almost all of them have gone up in value significantly since I sold. All right, here's a question. As a new YouTube creator in the vending space, how would you enter the space as a creator? Duck Collect, the answer to this question for me is always all about authenticity and telling your story. And so if your story right now is that you're just getting into the space, then make that your story. And tell the story of you leveling up and gaining new skills and all that kind of stuff, because there's people that are just like you who are interested to see that happen. So that would be my recommendation for you. All right, Jake, I feel that way about some cards I grade myself. I obviously like the card going into the grading, and afterwards, depending on rarity and features like swirls, I get emotionally conflicted. GR Gaming. It's such a great point, right? Because you grade a card. Most people, for most cards, you're grading the card because you want to appreciate, you want it to appreciate in value, and then you can realize that value by selling it. But the fact that you graded it means that you're into it for so much cheaper than the market price. And so that conundrum, it just comes up automatically. I know exactly how you feel. It's tough. Philosophy says, I do think if you love it, keep it. This is why my booster boxes, I have no attachment to it. This is why I buy booster boxes, because I have no attachment to it. My Blaskies are not for sale. See, that's a great way to do it. So, and I'm the same way. I have a portion of what's in my collection that, it doesn't. I don't have emotional connection to it. I have a more financial connection to it. And booster boxes, I think, serve a great purpose. Like if you have one and it's displayed on your shelf or whatever, like that's really nice. But like the appearance of just, cardboard cases of booster boxes is not very beautiful. Most people, I would say, are buying those kinds of things for long-term holds. Okay. Are you ever worried about Pokemon or Nintendo copyright striking you due to using their IP? I've heard Nintendo is very litigious and a lot of vendors use Pokemon and their logos. I've heard of like businesses getting like cease and desist for like their names and stuff like that, but not necessarily for like small resellers who have like a Pokemon character in their logo. I haven't heard of that, but maybe it's out there. You can definitely enlighten me. I've not really personally been concerned about that. Blast Boost. Will I be able to get the Blastoise Hollow Expedition from you? Yes. I will send you pictures after the stream. I have some pictures that I can send over to you. Thanks, Blast Boost. He's talking about, we had a really cool stream last night. We had a lot of vintage grails for sale. And so Blast Boost was tapping in for that stream. What do you think about Topps cards? You know what, Nick? I actually really like Topps Chrome cards. And this is, again, another thing that I got involved in just because I liked the appearance of them. They have pretty classic artwork. Some of the original anime appearance of those characters on the cards. And the Topps Chrome is great because they're all holographic. And so I'm currently probably like 85% of the way done with a master set of Topps Chrome Series 1 and 2, which is basically just the Pokedex from 1 to 151. And I'm pretty sure a lot of those cards, even like the base hollows, are a bit more expensive these days, but I haven't looked. I don't really care because I just want to finish my binder. But I like some of them. Okay. Jarchomp, we had an amazing weekend vending and left with more cash than we ever had at one time for the business. Papa Chen, congratulations. The market is exciting right now. More people than ever are getting involved. More people than ever are trying to build their collections. And there's a lot of eyeballs for 30th anniversary and Fire Red Leaf Green release and, that huge golden auction that happened. And so I'm not surprised. And obviously, I'm sure you're working hard at it and trying to build your business in the right way. So congratulations on the success. Me and my best friend are new to vending. You've provided tons of insight and help through videos and Midweek Machamps. Well, thanks for saying that. Yeah, when Riki and I originally chatted about having this live stream, it really wasn't about like, trying to monetize it in some way. It was more about just talking about what we're really passionate about and feeling like there was a space in the content sphere of Pokemon for a stream that is like part collector, part business, coming from people like he and I who have a lot in common. We both are educated and got degrees and then got corporate jobs. And then now we're really passionate about kind of building our own businesses independent of that. And so it's fun to be able to do it. And we're glad it's been helpful for you guys. Okay, Jake, I've been collecting for a bit now, and I'm going to be vending at my first show. Oh, yeah, at the end of the month. Any first-time vendor tips or advice? Yes. This is just kind of like general sales advice, but when you have a vendor table, it's basically a miniature card shop, and people are pretty well trained and accustomed on what they want a retail experience to be like. And so just be thoughtful about trying to do things to, help the people at the show have a good experience with you. Have your stuff presented in an eye appealing way. I would recommend that you price all of your items in advance. I would recommend that you stand up and greet every person that comes to your table, regardless of whether you think they're going to buy something or not. Ask a lot of questions, choose to be interested in people, and have fun. That's what I would recommend. Okay. Here's a good question. For buying slabs as a vendor, what do you think are reasonable percentages for the $200 to $400 range? Patrick Carey, for every vendor, it's going to be different because every vendor has different sales channels, and some vendors are going to be, willing to pay a higher percentage because their move is to just quick flip it to another reseller for a small percentage and just kind of churn and churn and churn and churn really high volume of cards. Some people are going to want to build out a really extensive vendor display and want to have a lot of inventory on hand at all times. And so because of that, because of the comparative less liquidity of their sales channel, they're going to probably offer lower. But I mean, for slabs in the $200 to $400 range, depending on their liquidity, somewhere between 75 and 85%, depending on the situation you're in, I'd recommend. Are we in another vintage boom? Feels like it's going under the radar with modern also going nuts. Young, Ty, I actually, for me at least, it's not going under the radar because I collect vintage cards, both ungraded and graded. And I love to deal in them because I love to find other people who are looking for those same cards and connect over our shared interest in that part of the hobby. And I follow a handful of accounts that are posting about sales data on some of these like Grail vintage cards that are getting sold. And so for me at least, it's not under the radar. It's like the whole radar. And to be honest, I'm looking at the 151 cards, for example, that have been going up recently. I was surprised when I kind of randomly encountered that because I'm just maybe not on that side of the content sphere. What I'm really looking at is those vintage cards. And so it's kind of funny. I think it just depends on what you're already following in your news sources and that kind of stuff. But yes, vintage, modern, all of it going up. Who knows all of the reasons why? We can speculate on some of those reasons, I'm sure. Question: did you hear about Collectopia, the TCG Hall of Fame? Your thoughts on it? Any desire to be part of the Hall of Fame? I got invited to go to the Collectopia. I really appreciated their kind invitation. I wasn't able to go. I think it conflicted with another show that I had already committed to. And it was right around my birthday, and I was hoping to be home and spend at least a couple of the days around that time with my wife. And so it didn't work out for this year. But it seemed like the event was very popular. A lot of the big names and faces, both collectors and content creators, were there, it seemed like. And I haven't heard anything but positivity about the event. So hopefully I can go in the future, and it will make sense for travel and whatever else is going on. All right. DeColt says Pokemon matters. Pop, nostalgia associated with the generation. Said it comes from. Yes, there's a lot. DeColt is mentioning a lot of the traits or the attributes of a card that can make it rare, or not necessarily rare, that can make it valuable. And I know that it can be a little bit of a mystery in the beginning for those who are just getting started in the hobby to know okay, what should I buy? What do people care about? And so, it's helpful to have some of these things and to keep those in mind. But again, if you are just getting involved and you're not sure what's valuable, I would just start simple and again, collect what you really like, the artworks you really like. That's the best place. The artwork and the characters, I would say, is the best place to start. New to vending, how do you balance your inventory between high-end slabs and mid-level singles? Ooh, you know what? I do have like a very rough system of kind of looking at the kind of breakdown of my inventory on a quarterly basis. But a lot of it is, I don't know, not necessarily intuitive, but just what I'm buying at the table has a lot to do with like little miniature experiments that I've done, either consciously or unconsciously. And what I mean by saying an experiment, I'm saying that every time you buy something, that's an experiment. And because you're about to do a little test of, did I buy at the right price? Did it go up or down? How fast did I sell it? What kind of collector was looking for it? All of that kind of data is going to enter the equation when you buy an item. And so like a lot of like how I balance the inventory is just kind of by feel. Sometimes because now we have enough cards that I have to ask Trey, the Jarvitar, like specifically which of like the modern singles and stuff that we have in stock and how many of them we have. Sometimes I'll have to ask him like, hey Trey, like how many Lugia V's or whatever do we have right now, so I can know if I should buy one in a specific interaction. But in general, like so we our table, like ideally we have like 3 tables that can hold like 8 or 9 display cases, and I like to have somewhere around 5 or 6 cases full of singles, spanning all of the generations, and somewhere around 2 or 3 cases of slabs. And why is that? Well, I like singles more than slabs. I collect more singles than slabs, and so that's kind of what I like to deal in. But also, I want to kind of strike that balance between having something for everyone and dealing in the items that I really like, so that we can kind of have the business move in a healthy way as well. But I would say the question for you, Mesh, is going to be answered based on how good or how successful you are at selling one item or the other. Like, if you are just like every time you have high-end slabs, you're just moving them like this, then I would just do more of that. Lean into what's working. You know what I'm saying? All right. What's the best way to buy multiple ETBs to get a better deal? Oh, I think what I was referring to, Osiris, is like, I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it's still the case. I haven't tried to buy something on Pokemon Center, like trading cards on Pokemon Center website in, I don't know, well over a year, maybe like a year and 3 or 4 months. Last thing I bought in Pokemon Center, I think I successfully pre-ordered some Prismatic back in like November of 2024. But back then, at least, there were like order limits of like 2 or 4 items. And I think what I was referring to was just, ordering as much as the order limit. So if they only let you buy 2 of them, you get 2, and, maybe you sell one into the secondary market to recoup a portion of the cost of the entire order, and then you get to keep one, and it's effectively, your cost basis effectively is much lower in that one that you keep. Jarchomp, we just sold $22,000 of inventory this weekend. Our remaining inventory is probably around 30K. Do we buy a Gold Star Rayquaza PSA 7 for 18K or reinvest the money into multiple cards? Whoa, Papa Chin, that is a big tactical decision to make. I'm not going to give you a recommendation, but I'll just speak from experience. When I was in your situation and my, total business value, right? Somewhere between the value of the cash that's in the business and the inventory in the business was in that like 50 to 60K range, which it sounds like that's what your situation is. I never owned a singular card that was that expensive in relationship to the value of the rest of my inventory. Now, I'm a little bit more risk averse maybe than some people out there who are like, get me into the big cards as soon as possible. So the answer to your question is, when I was in your situation, I wouldn't have bought the big card, not yet at least. But that doesn't mean that you're not in that situation. Maybe you already know how to, you have a great network for selling big cards like that. Like, who am I to say that you're not going to do really well on it? So that's just, I'll just speak from my experiences and the decisions that I made in the past. What's your opinion on the PSA 10 game art Charizard? Javon, my guess is you're talking about like the price of it. Again, another really popular artwork, Japanese exclusive, cool story behind it, how you had to get it in the magazine and everything. Battling Venusaur, like kind of manga style battling. Such a cool card. I don't own one. I'd like to own one, but now that they're at like 7,000 or 8,000 or whatever they're worth now in a 10, it seems a little bit more risky to buy one at this all-time high. But then you never know. Like, for all we know, it could get to 10 to 12 to 14K in the future. It's relatively higher pop. I think it's, someone can correct me, I think it's like 2,000 or 3,000 in a 10 as far as population. I might be wrong. So, you know, it's not like extremely rare, but it's very desirable. And if your question is more about like, what do I think about it as just like an item, I think that it's a really cool card. I'd love to own one. Quick water break. What is your take on the PSA 10 Magikarp from Paldea Evolved? Super low pop compared to other modern cards. What are you buying it at, and what are you selling it at? Defo, I have not owned one of those in, I think, a few months, maybe like 3 or 4 months. And so I have not been like privy to what the market is doing on that card specifically. But like, it's a high-end card. I think it's a well over $2,000 right now, which means if you want to get one by just like buying it from somebody, you got to pay strong. And by strong, I would say like most people are not going to accept less than like a 85% of recent comps kind of offer. I love the card. Awesome artwork. Love that kind of hidden Gyarados in the back. It is much lower pop than other modern cards, and I spoke a lot about this card specifically on the Card Lounge podcast last year. Yeah, big fan. Question from Nick. Thoughts on Topps Chrome and the other variants? They feel so underrated to me. I know not TCG, but they're vintage and honestly so cheap relative. You know, Nick, cheap is a subjective term. I know for a fact that some of those like Topps Chrome Sparkle, Techno, the variants in PSA 10 are extremely expensive, like tens of thousands of dollars for one copy. So I don't know what cheap is to you or to anyone else in this chat, but like loose copies of the regular holo, a lot of them are like what, $20 to $50 or so. That's what I'm collecting for my binder. I did at one point own a PSA 10 of the regular holo of Mewtwo, Zard, Venusaur, and Blastoise. Sold those all last year, long before there would have been any sort of spike. Now, the one thing I will say is that I would say that they're less liquid for sure than the actual trading cards. And they just have a smaller collector base. Not as many people are looking at them. Now, that might be an opportunity because it could grow in the future, or it might be kind of a sunk investment because they just stay stagnant for a long time. That's kind of how it goes with speculative plays like that for relatively more niche markets. How's the e-reader master set going? Have you been getting most of these cards at card shows? I feel like they are so rare to find. Harrison, we are about 80 cards away from being done with the entire binder. I would say the set that I'm closest on is Expedition. I only have like 5 or 6 more cards. And the set that I'm furthest away on, it's pretty close between Aquapolis and Skyridge. I have probably like 30 to 40 reverses missing for each one of those. And I have found, of what I have, like 98% of those at card shows. I've bought like maybe 3 or 4 of them on TCG Player. So good question. They are rare. Do you expect to see a similar effect for Prismatic, Destined, and Black Bolt and White Flare? Thermal, are we talking about like similar to what 151 has been doing? Maybe to a smaller degree. I mean, Prismatic definitely has the chance. It's a very desirable specialty set. There are people, including myself, that still kind of have like a bitter taste in our mouth about Prismatic, just because it was like so contentious back when it just got released. Like, no matter how you got it, if you had some Prismatic and you let it be known publicly that you had Prismatic sealed product, like, you just got hate on the internet, just catching strays all over the place. And so, like, that just doesn't feel good. I don't like that it has that history, but that's not going to be a bother for everybody out there. There's going to be a lot of people that entered the hobby well after that, and they're like, wow, this is a cool set. I want to have some of it. And it's very, very, very desirable. I mean, the chase cards, the total set value, the PSA 10 opportunity on the Sunbreon, it's like over a $4,000 card. You can pull a God Pack, which is like, it's low key, like a life-changing amount of money for when you open a God Pack. Like, if you open one, what is it, $12 pack of Prismatic or whatever it is, and you have the chance to pull potentially, like, I mean, if you graded them all and they all came back in a 10, like, I mean, that's got to be like $7,000 or $8,000 or something like that. Like, that's a ton of money for one singular pack. So that set's always going to do well. Destined is, in my humble estimation, like by far the best booster box set from Scarlet and Violet. So it'll always be strong. Will it always trend upwards? No. Even like Evolving Skies didn't always trend upwards. But I think it's going to be the front runner of booster box sets from Scarlet and Violet. Black Bolt White Flare, such a cool set. I love the chase cards. I love the SIRs. I love the fact that there's an IR for every single one of the Pokemon that were introduced in that generation. The only drawback is that it's from Gen 5, and like, Gen 5 compared to a lot of the other gens, specifically the first 4, is just not quite as loved. I know that some Black and White fans are going to not agree with that take, but I think it's kind of objective that if they would have done the same thing that they did for Black Bolt and White Flare with 151, where every single one of those mons gets an IR, that's like probably goes down as the best set in history. So again, Black Bolt, White Flare, great sets. I think they're going to perform well in the long term, but they're just not quite as desirable as some of those sets that have a few more of the more nostalgic Pokemon. That's my take. Have you fully adjusted to this lifestyle, or is it still crazy to you that you were able to quit your job? Slimy Chungus, first of all, great handle. Second of all, sometimes I have like nightmares about being like working in an office. Because I do like it quite a bit more. But the thing is, like, I know maybe from, again, I don't want to say how you guys perceive me, but my guess is that there's a group of you out there who perceive me as like just kind of doing these cool Pokemon things all the time. And we do a lot of cool Pokemon stuff. But there's also a ton of work. And I'm working easily twice as much as I used to when I was working a 9-to-5 job. I'm traveling, I think 36 or 38 of the 52 weekends this year out of state. Most of those by airplane. And yeah, like most days I wake up and, get ready for the day, breakfast, shower, etc. And then I just am doing some version of work for the business until I go to bed all day. And then on the weekends, I'm usually at a card show. So if your question is like adjusted, I can't possibly adjust because like it is technically entrepreneurship, and that by definition just means things are changing and growing, and you're taking more risks and blah 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 all the time. Every month to month is different. But if your question is like, have I kind of comfortably, confidently left that like corporate version of myself in the past, I would say yes. I don't think about going back and being employed by someone else anymore. All right. More questions. Here's a good one. How do you generally treat vendor-to-vendor deals? I want to give a better percentage to a fellow vendor when trading or buying, but also don't want to put myself in a loss. I mean, the crux of your question here, Pokeyanni, is, or Yanni, sorry if I mispronounced your name, is do you give better percentages to people when there is like a relationship that kind of undergirds the deal? And the answer is like pretty much yes. I find myself like, if a vendor wants to do a deal with me, but I don't really know them, I find myself kind of being closer to my regular offers. But if it's someone that I have like a close connection with, we've done a lot of business in the past, then yeah, I mean, we're always, and any vendor who is your friend, but is, again, is also running their own business, knows that any deal that you do, it needs to be mutually beneficial. And so like I'm never doing deals that are like destructive to my business. But there's also like items, and you definitely have this, I'm sure. You have items at your table or in your inventory that you got for, maybe less than others. Or maybe you have duplicates, and so you don't necessarily like need one of the copies of your Umbreon V or whatever as much as you need something else that you only have one of. And so it just depends on the item, depends on the person. But to generally answer your question, I've definitely done deals with people that are like, much higher offers than maybe, what would just be like the standard at the table. Higher than average, I guess, is the right way to say that. Would you trade a Van Gogh Pikachu PSA 10 for an Evo Skies booster box? Absolutely not. You're asking the wrong person. I love Evolving Skies. So Van Gogh, what are those worth right now? Last time I checked, they're like 2,000, 2,100 maybe. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're up to 25 or 26 or maybe higher. Who knows? I mean, that card pumps and dumps all the time. But Evo Skies boxes, again, I'm a more risk averse person. I'd much rather have the box. And Evolving Skies is easily my favorite modern set. So, thoughts on how much a PSA 10 Call of Legends Rayquaza SL10 would sell for? Ches, again, I'd have to do some like deep diving into the comps and stuff, but I know that like the regular holo Call of Legends Rayquaza is like, I think over 10,000 now, around 10,000. It's got to mean the shiny is like, I don't know, 20 more, something like that. I'd have to look at and see if there's any comps at all. I haven't seen one for sale where I've been recently. What's the worst situation you can think of? You can be in as a vendor once a bull market starts plateauing. The worst situation. I mean, the worst situation. If we're like, leaving out health emergencies and things like that, like if we're just talking about, the relationship between cash on hand and inventory and the value of your items, then the worst situation is that you've over leveraged yourself and taken on a bunch of debt in order to buy items that have now depreciated, and you need to liquidate those, start from zero or below zero, and you owe the bank money and you don't have any assets to back up the fact that you have a bunch of debt. Like, that sounds terrible. So I don't go into debt for Pokemon. Some people do. Some people do it very strategically, and they do very well. But it's just not something for me, at least not at this point. Not something I'm interested in. But if we're talking about a situation where you're not using debt, what else could be really bad? I mean, yeah, I mean, if you are super unbalanced in the amount of cash in your business and the amount of inventory in your business, and then all that inventory depreciates and you just have to kind of like take a ton of L's, then it can like wipe out a lot of the work / gains that you've had, and that doesn't feel good. But just remember that almost every business you've ever heard of that still exists today has been through a situation like that. And the ones that are still here are the ones that were able to adapt and bounce back and figure out new sales channels and figure out new ways to acquire items and break into new markets and all that kind of stuff. So the truth in business and in entrepreneurship is that you can't lose until you give up. The only way that you lose in business is that you give up. Because on the flip side, everything could be going wrong, but you're still in business. And so you still stand a chance to build things back and rebound and, get to new heights. So yeah, that's always on the table. Thank you for answering my question. You are the GOAT. Patrick, thanks for the kind words. Thanks for being here. Appreciate your support. Did you see the first Ed Dark Charizard non-holo PSA 10 that sold for $4K? This card sells for 2 to 2.5. This was a PSA listing for $7K and sold for $4K. It just seems a bit fishy to me. Thoughts? Dr. Bosco, when I don't have specific evidence of malice or, fraud, I usually default to ignorance being the most likely scenario here. So let me paint you a picture here. A collector goes onto eBay, maybe a comparatively newer collector who isn't proficient in navigating eBay's, filter systems to find out what things are selling for. They're not familiar with, the apps that you can type things into that will show you recent sales. What they do see is a listing for an item. They want that item, and so they make offers to the seller of that item. And inadvertently, they end up paying an all-time high price for that card because it's priced at 400% of its actual, current market price. But they talk the seller down to 200% of the market price. Well, the seller's fine with that because obviously they just sold a card that they're into for much cheaper than they just sold it for. And the buyer is happy, at least in the moment, because they feel like they got a really good deal, but they just don't know better. And I feel like that happens more than you think. And it can create new comps. And that's why, like, when you try to value a card, you try to look at, not just the all-time high, but, what are the other comps around it? And are there still listings available for well below that comp? Those are important data pieces when you're talking about the value of your cards. Happy Wednesday. Not sure if this was asked already. As a collector and or an occasional vendor, is using both double holo and card ladder worth to do, or just double holo? Kawika, I lean on multiple sources of information. Now I am, working directly with double holo. And so what I can say about that platform is our goal is to get the repository of data for sales data to be like the most robust, but then also the most helpful. So it won't just like show you what, a list of sales, but it'll show you like the average of the last 5. And, this is the high point in the last 30 days. This is a low point in the last 30 days. So you can make some of those educated decisions much faster than like searching and punching things out on your calculator. So, as many of those features are already developed, as we develop more and more, I'm going to be using other tools less and less because they're just going to be simply not as robust. Good question. What would be your starting 6, Jake? Oh man, let's do a blast in the past for Jake. So it's actually super convenient that Fire Red and Leaf Green got re-released. Leaf Green's it's probably a top 3 video game of all time for me, is Pokemon Leaf Green version. And my most decked out and beefed up team from back in the day when I was, 10, 11, something like that, on Fire Red Leaf Green was I did a little, trade swap with my brother. He let me borrow one of his Fire Red version temporarily so that I could trade a Charmander and a Squirtle over to him. And then I started a new game and picked Bulbasaur. So that means, and then I traded those other 2 back. So that means I started the game with all 3 starters. And I played the whole game with all 3 starters. Along the way, I picked up a Ghastly that I eventually evolved into Gengar. I picked up that Abra I eventually evolved into Alakazam, and I kind of used those interchangeably. I picked up a Jolteon, or an Eevee that I evolved into Jolteon, and I picked up Dratini that I evolved into Dragonite, and then a Machop that I evolved into a Machamp. So for the most part, my team was the 3 starters, Machamp, Alakazam, and Dragonite. But the Jolteon sometimes would take the place of the Venusaur, and the Gengar would sometimes take the place of the Alakazam. And I just grinded the Elite 4, got all of them to level 100. So that's kind of my main team. And that's why these days, like, what are the cards I'm collecting? Well, obviously I love Garchomp. I'm a huge Diamond and Pearl fan. But like the main cards I'm collecting, we've got Garchomps, we got Dragonites, and we got Machamps. Those are probably like the ones I have the most rare cards of. And then also Dialga. I love Dialga. People are talking about vintage going crazy, which is fair, but you have the distinct advantage of being able to gauge the liquid modern market. Do you think modern mostly recovered from November's fall? A lot of the cards have. But there's a lot of like specifically the PSA 10s to Colts have not recovered. Specifically like the cards that were in like the $300 range that like retraced all the way back to like the 120s to 150s have not regained their liquidity or their value. And I don't know what the exact story is there. If it's just a demand thing or if that segment is impacted by the advent of all these repacker companies and just how they're using those kinds of cards at that price point. I don't know the exact answer to that. But yeah, a lot of the singles have definitely recovered to their highs, or at least close to it. Do you ever worry fake cards become indistinguishable from authentic ones and hurt the value? I don't worry about that. I really feel like the Pokemon Company is adaptable, and if there was a way to like mimic their production and create fake cards, then they would change their production style and make them more unique. But I mean, this is Bud, like inadvertently what you've done here is you have kind of made a little advertisement for grading companies, grading and authentication companies. And there's a reason that those have a huge place in the industry. It's because people don't want to have to worry about that. And so they trust a third party to authenticate things. Where do you think the Poke market will go, seeing how things are going? Things are trending up. There's still a lot of tailwinds. 30th anniversary set has yet to be announced. Now that we already have a teaser on the Wind and Waves game that's going to come out next year that looks awesome, in my opinion. I thought the starters looked really good. And the Pokemon Company is very good at hinting about what's coming up in the future and continuing to generate buzz and hype. And yeah, I mean, there's so many tailwinds. So my prediction is that the year is going to continue to be very strong. Did you see the PSA drama with the lenticular Deoxys they damaged? I did see that. Yeah, a person sent in a really expensive card to get reholdered. It was in an old PSA label, and it was a PSA 10. And the reholdering process, something happened there where an employee or a machine accidentally damaged the card, and so PSA, seemed like they were very communicative and told the person, yes, we accidentally damaged your card. It's now a PSA 6 according to our grading experts, and they gave the person some options, and then they made some sort of an offer to like buy the card at the PSA 10 value, but then they ascribed a value to it that was quite a bit lower than the last sale. So yeah, I mean, I've been there, not at this scale, but close. I mean, I had a card that I sent in. We made a video about it that we wanted a reholder. PSA said that it had been tampered with, and so they wouldn't reholder it. They would either regrade it or send it back raw. And so I had them regrade it, and they gave it a 7, and it was originally a 10. And that card is now worth like $20,000, and I potentially lost out on a lot of value there. So I mean, this kind of stuff happens. But I think what people forget is that when you send cards in to grade, although it maybe feels like it shouldn't be this way, like that is in and of itself a little bit of a gamble. Like it just is, because there's subjectivity in everything, and there's risk in every decision along the way. And for the most part, cards are going to get graded, and grading the cards has a great chance of increasing the value at very minimal work to you, and comparatively minimal expense. Otherwise, a lot of people wouldn't be grading. And so for every one of the stories that I have where things went totally, totally wrong, I have plenty of stories where things went totally, totally right. And that is kind of how life goes. What happened here with this person is not fair, but in life, sometimes not fair things happen. And what you have to do is do your best to try to make it fair and try to appeal to the right authorities and get things made right as much as you can. And that's all you can do. Where do you think Pokemon will go the next year and just the future in general? I have a 25K collection and haven't opened a pack since 2013. Frank, how have you resisted the urge to open a pack since 2013? Man, I love ripping packs. Yeah, like I said earlier, I think the hobby is strong. I truly believe that collectibles are a legitimate asset in today's economy. And I mean, I've staked my entire livelihood on this industry, so I'm definitely the right person to ask if you want an answer about whether or not whether or not the industry is going to go in a strong direction. All right, what else we got? Thoughts on Classic Collection from 2023. Okay, so what we're talking about here is that big like black game board set that came out with 3 decks in it. Venusaur, Blastoise, and Charizard deck. I think it's a cool product, but if your question is about what do I think about as far as its value long term, I think that there's other items that you could be buying that are going to be less cumbersome and quicker to appreciate than that. But I have one. I think they're cool. I think whenever I get the itch to actually play the game, I think that's such a cool game board to play on. Do you think if the market does fade, Pokemon will try to bring back a nostalgic set feature to buoy the market? Woke Up Dangerous, I think Pokemon like has already built it into their strategy to like every so often appeal to more nostalgia than other sets. So like for example, we've got the Destined Rival set that came out, has a bunch of nostalgic Pokemon and the entire like Rocket, theme and everything. It's a huge throwback. And then you've got a set like Perfect Order that is very modern. It's specifically referring to Pokemon and stuff that are from the newest game. My hunch is that a lot of the cards are going to be very playable for the TCG. So yeah, I would say that Pokemon kind of has a strategy to kind of go back and forth between nostalgia and pushing the game forward, and it seems like they're doing a pretty good job of balancing that. Big super chat from Blast Boost. Thank you, my man. I appreciate your support always. You're always very generous. Would you hold off in selling any super low pop PSA 10, BGS 10 during the run up to see where it settles, or would you sell during the run up assuming you want a max profit? You are not in a financial bind, just profit. Blast Boost. I think about this question frequently. And like, the maximizer version of me, the financial maximizer version of me is like, wow, like maybe I do try to take advantage of the market being at all-time highs and sell some of these items. But here's the real truth. When you sell those items, Blast Boost, what you're going to have is more money. And what you've told me here in this chat is that you're not in a financially binding situation. So the only reason that you would want more money than you would want the cards is because you have something else that you want to use that money for. Money is a tool. Money isn't something that should just like sit in an account so that like you have some sort of a emotional security as you pile it higher and higher and higher. Like money should be used for something. So if you like have a big purchase that you want to liquidate cards for, or you have another speculative play you're trying to make, then maybe that's justified to sell your item. But like, I would say you wouldn't sell something unless you know what you want to do with the money. And maybe it's as simple as, well, I want to maximize what I feel like my gains would be from this item and move it into a different asset that I think is slower growing, but less speculative. That's realistic. But I can't give you that advice because I'm not your financial advisor. IDK, we've been over this already, but how do you feel without Riki? Man, I miss Riki. He's a great guy. I talk to him almost every day now, and I'm excited for next week for him to be back. But I'm also excited to be with you guys and do a Q&A. We do some Q&A at the end of every session, but we usually run out of time after about 15 or 20 minutes, and so we wanted to give back and do a bigger Q&A for you guys. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it, and it's been helpful for you. All right, let's go to the next. Would you sell your 151 singles with how high they have been climbing lately to rebuy later in the thought that they will go back down? Drew, so obviously I have some 151 singles in my business inventory. Those I have been willing to buy, sell, and trade at every price point because they're awesome and very collectible and people want them. As far as my personal 151 singles, well, those are part of a master set. And the kind of work and hassle that it would be to like pull all those cards out of my master set and sell them so that like I could maybe like rebuy them. Let's say the market totally crashes in 6 months and all those cards go down by 50%. And then I go and rebuy them. Like the actual difference would be that like I don't like, I don't know how I would define this. Like, you make a couple $100 on that decision. It just seems like a lot of kind of hassle to disrupt my collection for not that much of a change. Um, I don't know. I think that there are better ways to make that same couple $100 that is just kind of less disruptive to your collection, if that makes sense. Not a question, but did you finish Dungeon Crawler, Carl? You know what? I got to book 4, I think, and kind of stalled out. And then I got like re-interested in the Stormlight archive from Brendan Sanderson. And so I'm like really deep into that right now. But I'll definitely get back to the Dungeon Crawler series. Very cool, very fun. I'm a lifelong video gamer, and so like a literature RPG like that is super entertaining for me. New vendor here. How do you balance your inventory between bigger cards and mid-price singles? We answered this one, Mesh. Hopefully you got to see that answer. Of my biggest questions for myself right now is if I should use the money I was saving for a big show or use it on a bigger purchase for my collection. Do I want the cards or the experience? Wow. Well, for me personally, I like things more than experiences usually. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to have any experiences. But I would say, as far as like, if you were to analyze where my time and money goes, it's more into things than experiences. But that might change over time. You know, that's just kind of where I am now. Okay. Question. If my favorite card ever, Mega Swampert, is Pop 1, oof, would you say to try and hunt it down or buy the collection boxes and grade it? Whoa, Phil, that that is so tough. I've never attempted either of these, because like I had one specific Grail that I just felt like I needed to have. I have owned some very low pop cards like this. So, for example, most of you know that big chase card from the team up set, that Magikarp and Waylord, where Magikarp is kind of like getting blasted in the air by Waylord's water spout. Really great card. There is also a full art version of those two tag team card in that set. And there's also a regular GX version of that card, but it's not from the set. It's exclusive to a collection box called like Towering Waters GX box or something like that. And that specific promo, I mean, it's one of the tag teams. It's a tag team card. And so if you're someone who wants to get all of the tag team cards in a PSA 10, you have to have that one. It's included. It's same artwork, same design and everything. And it's like Pop 9. I think there are like 9 or 10 of those in the world. And I had one last year in the middle of the year. I got it at Card Party in Tampa. And when I looked at that card, I could just tell that like the print quality and like the centering issues on those promos in the boxes was so bad that there's a reason that it's Pop 9 or 10. And in your case, Pop 1. Wow. So crazy. I mean, grading another to get it to Pop 2 does sound a bit like a tall order. It sounds like something that you can get really frustrated doing, because every time you get a 7, 8, or a 9 or whatever, it's just like sunk cost. But then again, the Pop 1 is probably crazy expensive. Whoever has it knows what they have, you know. All I can say is I feel for you. That's a tough situation to be in. I would probably go for trying to find the slab. That's probably the easier move. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay. How does a small local vendor break into the bigger shows like Collecticon, Front Row, and Card Party? When I did my first ever out of state show, it was a Front Row. It was the Front Row Pasadena in May of 2024, I think. Yeah, I think May. And it wasn't like competitive to get into the show. I just kind of like went onto their website, and it was maybe like a month and a half in advance, and I just bought a couple of tables to their website and was good to go. These days, depending on the show, it's all like sold out instantly, and maybe never even gets to the public because there's a waiting list that's so long. That's tough. And so if your question is like, how do I get into those shows? Sometimes the best way is like if you have a friend or a contact who has a table or a couple of tables, and you can kind of vend with them and somehow get on the waiting list. But I would also say like there's enough big shows out there, enough bigger shows, a lot of big show circuits out there that you don't necessarily have to be in those three, Collecticon, Front Row, or Card Party. Like there's a lot of big shows that you could get into that are like, 2, 3, 500 tables plus. And they're just not quite as competitive, or, you can find a way in. And so you just have to be scrappy and network and contact the organizers and email and that kind of stuff if you're getting your shot blocked all the time. But you'll eventually get into one. The other part of your question, it sounds like, is in regards to like how do you get ready for a show like that, as far as like your inventory value and stuff. And my experience was really just to go to local shows until I had, grown my inventory to a level where I could, completely fill all the cases on a single table. And then I just tried it out when I went to a bigger show. And there were a lot of people at that show who had much larger inventories than me. And there were some people that had less inventory than me. And not every person at the big shows is just going to be totally stacked with cards. And sometimes that's a great situation to be in. You bring 5, 10K worth of cards, and you bring 5K of liquid cash that you can buy things, and all of a sudden you're right there vending with all the big dogs. So that's what I would say. Do you think it is necessary to do card shows as a seller, or can you just sell online and be successful? Of course you can sell online and be successful. I mean, some of the like most successful sellers in the entire business don't go to shows at all. But I personally love going to shows. I love the energy in the room. I love being able to like window shop at all the tables, and I love the in-person interactions with people because I really like people and making connections and being social. So that's kind of my personality, but that isn't for everybody. And so, yeah, I mean, online, there's tons of sales channels. And think about shout out Brian Pokey. He doesn't go to, I mean, he might go to shows to like, meet some friends or something, but he doesn't go to shows to vend at all. He built his entire business just, selling mostly sealed product online. Untapped says, how do you feel about vintage 10s that wouldn't 10 under current grading standards? I've generally stayed away. Untapped, yeah, I mean, I think I partially agree that like there's some 10s out there that I would rather not own because they have like pretty clear and visible damage or issues with them that makes it feel like it would be a slam dunk that they would not be a 10 if you tried to regrade them. But then again, like there's PSA 10s out there that have those kinds of issues that still sell for all-time highs. So it's not like a one-size-fits-all situation. It's not like all cards that are PSA 10 that have like, visible whitening or something are just doomed to be, not considered valuable for the rest of forever. So I don't know. I think that it can make sense for your business to buy a card like that is an old school, or even a current PSA 10 that maybe you feel like it shouldn't be if the numbers make sense, if it's a business decision. I personally don't collect those cards because if I'm going to buy a 10, I feel like I am justified in being picky. In fact, I think you're justified in being picky about anything you buy in your collection. So if it's for your PC, like just collect what you want. You know what I'm saying? And I personally don't want PSA 10s. I don't want to pay the PSA 10 premium if I don't think the copy of the card is very clean. Here's a good question. If you were to start over with nothing but your PC, would you save up money to start vending or sell the PC even though it has sentimental value? Great question. I would, if I started over, I would do it the same exact way that I did, which was I thinned down my PC a bit to kind of instantly have some business inventory. I know a lot of people in the reselling business, whether cards, games, shoes, clothes, whatever, have done that same thing. And yeah, if I had to start over from scratch, then yeah, I'd probably just kind of be collecting some things here and there over time, and then decide that I wanted to get into selling and take a portion of the items that I have in my PC and bring them to the table. It's exactly what I did. Bubble Mew is in all categories the best card from the entire SV era. Agree? Whoa. I think I'm okay with that. I think I'm okay with that, Elder Unlimited. I love Bubble Mew. There is a Bubble Mew in my God binder, and there's not very modern cards in there. Not very many modern cards. But there is a Bubble Mew. Good point. Bro, so I got 2 Pokemon Oreos box, and I was offered $200 a piece. Would you take that or hold off and keep them for 20 years? Great question. If I were you, I would open those immediately and eat them with milk. Good question. Super chat from Ash. Thank you so much. Appreciate your support of the stream. Super chat from Spuggies. I know you get this question a lot, but I feel like things keep popping up with PSA, BGS. Do you think the future is still all PSA? Thoughts on tag? Spuggies, here's the truth. And I don't want to defend companies who make mistakes. I don't want to defend mistakes and bad actions. But here are the facts. PSA is grading hundreds of thousands of cards a week, right? Yeah, I think hundreds of thousands a week is how the numbers shake out. And so if they have, let's say their quality assurance process is 99% right. Like they are not damaging your card. They're, using their objective kind of rubrics to grade the card, encapsulate it. It gets shipped back to you just like they committed. Let's say that happens 99% of the time. That still means that thousands and thousands of cards every year are mistakes. And so like at scale, there's just going to be more problems because there's more opportunities for there to be problems. And for me to sit here and say that like there's news and there's failings and there's mistakes, and so therefore their business is going to fall off. I think that if I were to say that, that would be naive, because most businesses out there are making more mistakes than 1% of the time, including me. I make mistakes. I buy the wrong thing. I say the wrong thing. I don't sell at the right time. I miss a flight or I, whatever, tons of things that I do wrong. Yeah, I mean, I still feel like I can have a very successful business despite that. PSA is the front runner. In order for that to change, their margin of error would have to be way, way bigger than it is today. I think that they would have to like monumentally fail, like over and over and over and over and over, to lose all of that kind of public demand and credibility that they have. You know, that's kind of where I'm at on them. Good question. I have a bunch of 25th celebration singles that I don't care about much. When do you think I should try to sell them to get the most value? Yinya, a lot of those have already gone up in value quite a bit. I'm trying to think. Let's maybe just go, let's rewind 5 years. There was a pretty big spike for Generations product, which is the 20th anniversary, around the time of the 25th anniversary. I'm pretty sure at that time, the Generations ETBs got up to like $800, maybe to $1,000 a piece, right around the time Celebrations was coming into its own. But then again, Generations, an ETB is now what, like $2,500? And so the answer to your question is, for all we know, those Celebrations cards, like, they might hit all-time highs this year, but they might hit all-time highs that are even higher years down the road. So the better question is, what's your time horizon, and what are you going to do with the value that you get from selling all those cards? And that's what I said to Blast Boost earlier. The question is about timing and speculation, yes, but it's even more about what are you going to do with the money in. And if you need that money for something specific, then that's the right time to do it. You know what I mean? I have the opportunity to buy box fresh, half and full art Luigi Pikachu for $4,200. This will be my biggest single card purchase. Is this a good price point to get in at? Box fresh, half and full art Luigi. That sounds great. I'm pretty sure the Luigi full art is going for close to 20,000 in a PSA 10, and the Luigi half art is like 6 to 8,000 in a PSA 10. So 4,200 for like box fresh sounds very cheap. That sounds cheap, depending on the condition that they're in. A box fresh meaning like they're in the cellophane or fresh out of the cellophane and have never like really changed hands and just been in sleeve or top loader. I mean, that sounds almost too good to be true, to be honest, Blucko. I'll be honest with you. Appreciate the advice. I def know what you mean about making the experience enjoyable. Thanks for being here, Tortrick. Do you have a list of the PSA 10 Delta species that you still need? Oh, Yangao. I made a video a while back, middle of last year, about giving up on trying to get all, what is it, like 100 of the ones that I wanted. So I still have a handful in my PC, the ones that I really, really liked, but I sold most of those last year. Question. As a vendor who has gone national, for lack of a better term, how do you balance attending / supporting local shows with attending national ones? Trainer, I prioritize travel shows these days, mostly because in my market, the shows are great, but they're just not quite as big. So I prioritize the bigger ones. And then whenever I'm home and there is a show, I try to make it there, whether I'm vending or just going there as a patron to walk around and buy a few cards and see the people that are vending locally. So I think this year we'll probably do 2 or 3 local shows, hopefully. How's Franny enjoying her new life changes? My girlfriend and I are very happy for her. Franny's doing great, leaning into her hobbies and passions. And yeah, it's a cool balance we have right now. So thanks for asking. Shout out, Franny. How do you consistently make profit on such small margins when everybody wants to sell at 100% and buy at a lesser percent? A1, good question. I would say in general, I am not buying the items from people that they are insisting on selling at 100%. Like if someone says, "Hey, would you buy this Umbreon VMAX Altart. I usually ask, okay, how much do you want for it? And they're like, well, I think the last sale was 3,600. I want 3,600. I just politely tell them that I would buy the card for the purpose of reselling it. And so I can't offer 100%. And they usually say, well, what can you offer? And I'm like, well, I do some math and make them an offer, and they either take it or they don't. And their reasoning really is their own. Maybe they're in the situation where they feel like they have a good sales channel, and so they feel like they can get the most out of it, and the amount of work that they would have to do in order to get that as full of a market value as possible is a fair trade-off for them. But for a lot of people, they just want to get cashed out ASAP with very minimal friction, and that's where resellers come into play. When you can make one phone call or send one DM and sell $25,000 of your collection and, net 20K, let's say, and it's all extremely simple and you're working with someone that you have trust in, oftentimes that ends up being the choice that you make. Like when I think about, if I ever got to the point where I wanted to like liquidate a huge portion of my collection all at once because I wanted to get, liquid for, some sort of a large purchase or something like that. I accept internally that I would need to balance my expectations and realize that I wouldn't get 100% of market value for it. Like the speed at which you need to sell something and the percentage of market price that you get for it, those are absolutely correlating numbers. All right, they're oppositely correlating. Like the faster you need the money, the lower percentage that you'll likely have to accept. You know what I mean? Question: what is a popular opinion in Pokemon investing culture that you strongly disagree with? Whoa. I think that there's a common, and maybe this is less about the Pokemon investing scene and more just like human beings. But whenever we're talking about money with human beings, there's always going to be FOMO. And there's so many different potential plays and opportunities and potential speculations that you could try to utilize, try to take advantage of when it comes to buying cards and buying sealed product and whatever you're investing or speculating in, that it's inevitable that you're going to miss a lot of them. Like, you just don't have an infinite amount of time, an infinite amount of money or bandwidth to buy everything that could potentially go up in value. And I think that some people in the investing community get so caught up in trying to like do all the plays that they miss. They try to do all the plays, and so like they have this kind of emotional regret or fear of missing out, basically. But you just need to pick what you're going to pick and make the decisions you're going to make. And if someone else, let's say you buy a bunch of Evolving Skies boxes and they're doing well for you, and then, your neighbor, they buy 55 copies of Bubble Mew and it goes from 80 to 300 in like 6 weeks. Like, wow, they made an incredible play, much more speculative, much more risky, in my opinion, but it worked out incredibly well for them. You just got to tip your hat to them. Say, hey, very nice. And maybe try to learn something from them if you want to do something similar. Maybe you need to ask them some questions. Maybe get more curious and less jealous. Maybe that's the advice I have. Clutch says, I sold my 151 Blasty and 151 Venu. Is this weekend a good time to rebuy, to wait till they go back down? Not sure I understand what you mean, Clutch. You sold your Blasty and your Venusaur. Is this weekend a good time to rebuy, to wait till they go down? Are you saying you want to buy this weekend and hope that they go down in value? That sounds counterproductive. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Sorry. I've totally failed in understanding that one. Here's a very kind super chat from Ash. Do you believe that vendors use their vendor status to grow their own PCs cheaper than everyone else? Is it fair / unfair? I know you trade at 1-for-1 for your PC. Ash, I don't always trade at 1-for-1 for my PC because sometimes I don't decide something's for my PC until I get home and like realize that I really want one, or that it actually is a card I want for my binder, or it's a card that I want to sit on for a while because I think it's going to go up in a short period of time. Like, I think that there's so many different things that I'm thinking about and whatever, that I don't always like clock in real time that I'm going to keep something for longer than just I'm trying to immediately resell it. But we actually did an entire episode of the Midweek Machamps on this exact topic, and it was with the Bulbasaur, I believe. And the answer is, I mean, yeah, like going to shows is a great way to be in the right place at the right time for really cool deals on unique items to walk up to your table. Like some of the biggest cards in my PC, I found either they walk up to my table, which is rare, or even more likely is I saw them at another vendor's table and I worked a deal with them to get it. That's the most likely scenario for me. And the question, is it fair or unfair? I mean, if your business is to deal in cards, it's inevitable that you're going to get cards for less than they're worth. Otherwise, your business will fail. Like if you're constantly buying cards for full market value and trying to resell them, that's like a lot of work for not enough profit to have an actual business. And so I would say, is it fair or unfair? Like that's kind of like a subjective moral question. The reality is that on the secondary market, you're going to find opportunities and get items that are, that are currently priced at less than what you could possibly sell them for. And if you decide to keep some for your personal collection, then that's your right because you bought the item. You know what I mean? All right, guys, I think we're going to go for 2 total hours. So we got about 18 minutes left. Hopefully I can get to as many questions as possible. Why is it okay for vendors to value regular people's slabs at a percentage of last solds, but don't consider last solds on their inventory? Delta, I think it's because when you are going to a reseller to sell them an item, effectively, like, and again, I know this is kind of a complicated conversation, but effectively there's a little bit of like a hot potato game that's being played, right? Like the reseller has no idea how much you paid for an item, or how much you got an item for a lot of items in the hobby. Like a collector is getting an item for like much cheaper than the current market value. And so like the risk for them to hold that item is very low because, let's take a base set Charizard that's in, pretty good condition. Let's say a base set Charizard PSA 9. 2 years ago, that's like $1,000 card, let's say. Now it's, I don't know. I don't know the reasons. I mean, somewhere between 3 and 5,000 maybe right now. So let's say the collector got that card for full market value, $1,000. They paid full ask a couple of years back. And then now, 2 years later, now the card, let's say it's tripled in value, they want to sell it and realize some gain. Well, the risk that they have at keeping it is much lower because the probability that it goes from 3,000 down to below 1,000 is much lower than it is for it to go from, like, let's say 3,000 to like 2,600, because you're probably going to want 25, 2,600, somewhere around there for your Charizard if it's valued all day at 3,000 and higher, right? Well, the transaction of selling to the reseller in that situation is basically giving them the hot potato, if you understand what I mean. And they're taking on the risk, and more risk than you, most likely, because they're paying a much higher number for that item. And so they are going to price things off the like most clear comps that they can find, because in their efforts to sell it, they are trying to reduce as much as possible their downside risk of it depreciating to below their buy-in price, which is much higher in this situation than yours. So yeah, I mean, the vendor's trying to reduce their downside risk. And if you as a seller, as a collector who's selling your item, are opposed to that kind of interaction with a reseller, knowing that they're going to have to make an offer to protect their downside, then what you need to do is you need to build your own sales channel and find the collector who is willing to pay that full market price, because that is the person that is willing to pick up that item and either just really wants it, and or they feel like they're going to speculate that it's going to continue to go up. And so they're comfortable with that buy-in price of the full 3,000. So hopefully that makes sense. But the answer to your question is about reducing downside risk and, being the person to accept that risk. A reseller isn't buying the item because they like it. Usually they're buying it because they want to try to make a little bit of money off of it. Hopefully that's helpful. How do you determine how much of your gross income you pocket, how much it goes back into the business? John, so our business is set up as an S Corp, which means we have a legal requirement to have a payroll system that kind of pays out employees like a salary. And so the way that an S Corp works, and again, I'm not a lawyer nor an accountant, but the way that I understand an S Corp works is that you are required to pay yourself, even as the business owner, a salary that is based on a fair market salary of someone in your industry. And that's kind of like a subjective requirement as far as like what exactly that number is. And finding out that number is definitely something you'd want to chat about with your tax professional and maybe your legal professional. So the more complex answer to your question is I really prioritize building the business over like trying to pull out as much cash as possible, because as an entrepreneur, every dollar that you take out and pay yourself is a dollar that you can't use to potentially grow or save your business if it's in a downward trajectory versus an upward trajectory. Most entrepreneurs, I would say, small business owners, are paying themselves, at least at the beginning, very little in order to keep as much money in the business to keep it afloat and healthy as possible. I'd say hopefully that's kind of a fair description of what small business owners are doing. Delta, it's up to you as a seller to place the value on their card. Good point, Drew. Good point. Are you excited for the Max versus Charles fight this weekend? If so, who are you rooting for? Oh my gosh. I'm so glad we've got a UFC question here in the chat, guys. Shout out to Max Blessed Holloway this weekend. Rematch against Charles do Bronx Oliveira in Las Vegas. I will be watching. I'm rooting for Max. He's the younger man. He has more championship level experience and success than Charles does, but he hasn't been fighting at the lightweight weight class for as long. So he's a more talented striker than Charles is. Charles is a more talented grappler. It's a great matchup. I'm going to, if I was a betting man, which I'm usually not, I would put money on Max. But yeah, go do your own research if you're a betting person. But yeah, I like Max. I want him to win. Got to meet him in Hawaii, was very, very cool. And I'm excited for the fight. Hopefully I can find a place to watch it this weekend, even though we have a card show. Bro, you're a big inspiration. Just getting back into this collecting thing and even thinking about dabbling and vending because of you. Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate the kind words, man. Welcome back to the hobby. Question on a specific card. Okay, we chatted about the Magikarp from Paldea. Thanks, Defo. Do you believe in vendor entitlement? I don't know the definition of vendor entitlement, but what I do believe, and I think what you're getting at, is that like vendors approach the hobby in a way that's maybe different than collectors. And you can call it entitlement, but I think the behavior that you're trying to distill with that word is actually more about like approaching the hobby from more of a business lens than a collector lens. And when you approach the hobby from an exclusively a business lens, you're going to make decisions and interact with cards and maybe even people in a way that is focused on money rather than on, items. And that is it's basically a reality. Like if you get into vending, you're choosing to introduce the complexity of having to have a business lens whenever you are interacting with with collectors and with cards. And this is actually a question that Riki Oyama and I have talked quite a bit about, and some of the hesitancy he's had about, taking the vending as a full-time thing or going full-time in the hobby is because he doesn't want to lose that magic. He doesn't want to lose the collector mentality, at least not 100%, because he's been vending for a while and doing content for a while already. And he's just concerned a little bit about like losing that feeling, a little bit of the wonder and the fact that it's kind of a hobby and you don't want the hobby to turn into business energy and for you to lose the love for it. And I understand that. My response has always been that I love the hobby. I'm still a big time collector, but I also love business. And I love the idea of being my own boss. And so if I'm able to kind of put those two together and, there's going to be pros to that situation. There's going to be cons. I believe for me, the pros outweigh the cons. Do I treat every card the same like I used to when I was only collecting? No, I can't. I simply can't, because there is a little like reseller part of my approach to the hobby that's going to impact how I feel about cards. But I believe, sorry, water break. I believe that part of the hobby, which is approaching it with kind of money in mind, that's still present even for the most diehard collector. Because at the end of the day, we're collecting items not just because they're nostalgic, but also because they're rare or they're valuable. That combination is really what is making the Pokemon hobby so large and making it boom so much right now. There's nostalgia, and there's rarity / exclusivity, and there's value. And most collectors that I've talked to, they either consciously or subconsciously like an item more when it's worth more, when it has more financial upside or just has a bigger price tag. And I think that that's natural and that's okay. Hopefully that is helpful in answering your question. As a new vendor who is trying to keep up inventory for shows, would you recommend signing up for a show in hopes to buy or source cards beforehand so your cases are full? Hey, I'm Adam. You don't need to have full cases when you go to a show. In fact, there's a lot of successful vendors who go to the show with very minimal, sometimes nothing. There's a couple cool videos on YouTube about going to shows with zero inventory at all. And that can be kind of a fun experiment. I don't do that because I like to, bring an allotment of cards and, buy, sell, and trade. But one of the people that we've been working with in our consultation, one of our consultation clients that Riki and I are working with, did their first show with just a handful of cards, very minimal. And their goal there was to buy much more than they were going to sell so that at the subsequent shows, they would have that inventory built up. That's totally appropriate. So I would say I'm a proponent of signing up for the card show as soon as possible. And the best way to learn all the things that you need to have or need to prepare for a card show is to go to a card show and learn those things and experience, oh man, I wish I would have had this or that, or I wish I didn't do this or that. Experience is the best teacher, you know what I'm saying? A friend of a friend sold an Umbreon graded PSA 7.5 for $11K. And any idea which Umbreon it could be? My only guess would be the Gold Star. Yeah, that's the only one I can think of, but like 11K. Yeah, my only thought is that a Gold Star would carry that kind of price. 11K for a 7.5. I'd have to look at comps, but that doesn't sound too unrealistic. Not often I hop into the lives, but I watch all the VODs. I think a cool segment idea would be called Take a Chancey, where you guys talk about a speculative investment you guys have recently made. I love that. Taking a Chancey. Thank you. I will definitely pocket that idea, and hopefully you're okay if I steal it. Hello, Jake, and hello, chat. Are we getting great advice tonight? Looking forward to replaying what I missed. Thank you for spending the time to do this, Jarchomp. Hopefully this is good advice. Should I sell my Mario and Luigi and ponchos? Please help. No, Arvin, you should always only buy more. Just stack up as many ponchos as possible. Might have missed it earlier, but what are your thoughts on the recent 151 spike? Is it organic or are they all being pumped? We did talk about this earlier. I'm not surprised that they're jumping in value. I personally, I don't necessarily know all the exact telltale signs of, market manipulation and whether it's like sales volume or something else on TCG Player, but I'm not surprised those cards are selling and going up in price. They're very popular, and the set is going out of rotation next month. Okay. When you're going from being a small hobby vendor to a full-time business, how have you handled accurately tracking all of the transactions that you're doing every weekend? Jay Crast, this is kind of an accounting question. And even before I went full-time, I started working with an accountant who also, I have my bookkeeping go through their business as well. So that's a much better question for an accountant than for me. But the answer to that question is you need to be able to understand the profit and loss of your business, not only for paying taxes, but also so you can understand if your business is successful. So you need to develop a system that makes sense for you. Okay. What were you in Siberia for? What type of work were you in? I was there for a mission through my church. I did leave that church a number of years back, but yeah, I grew up in a church that had a requirement for young men to go on a mission for a couple of years. So I was there for religious reasons. Question. I collect Japanese PSA 10 e-readers. What's the best way to value them when the floors have disappeared and the low lists are much higher than last sold, with very few entering the market? Clark Rogers, I mean, this is essentially the same question as just like any low pop card. The current value of a low pop card when the market is strong like this is somewhere between last sold and low list. And there can be a lot of room between those two numbers. And so what we're talking about is a thinly traded market where the sale price for that item, if you decide to sell it, is likely going to be somewhere in there, and the higher the number that you get usually depends on if you've found the right buyer who really wants that card, and how good you are at negotiating, and how long you're willing to wait for an actual transaction. So that's all the advice I can give you. Low pop stuff is inherently hard to value. That's why it's interesting, and that's why in strong markets like this, it keeps kind of taking leaps up in value and price. Okay, let me skim through here and see if I can find one more question for us, guys. We've been about 2 hours in. I appreciate you all being here. Let's see what this is. Wild Theoretical. If Pokemon cards continue, I think this is going to be a great one to end on. If Pokemon cards continue to get more valuable and the fakes become indistinguishable, do you think older search slabs could be actually more sought after? Oh, okay. Back on the question of like authenticity. I have never thought of this situation, Wake Up Dangerous. Would old search be more valuable? Are we talking about like modern slabs getting counterfeited? Is that kind of what you're referring to? Because there's enough ways to see if a slab is counterfeit or not. Most of the time you can really figure that out. Condition of the slab, QR code, cert number, images that are on the website that you can compare to the actual card. It's not too easy to fake on the modern ones because they have all the images. Let me find another question here for us, guys. Let me see if Rio Kylo's question. Okay, this is going back to the very beginning of our stream, guys. Shout out Rio Kylo. How do you balance keeping a Grail for your PC versus selling it when the ROI makes sense? During Drip, I've heard you say you never had some of the cards you're selling in your PC. Well, the first thing I'll say is, if I want a card for my PC and I get it like through regular business means, I'm not opposed to keeping it. In fact, most of the time I do. Like the e-readers that I need for my binder, I'll definitely PC those if they get traded in. If I'm selling a card that I truly want for my PC, I'm probably only selling it because I have it already. That would be a duplicate. But what you're asking here in the first sentence is really the toughest question. How do you balance keeping a Grail for your PC versus selling it when the ROI makes sense? So we go back to the purpose of selling, Rio. The purpose of selling something. I know that some people kind of get like this brainworm where they need to sell something at the peak of its value because they need to maximize profit. But selling something, all it does is transition value from item into cash. And cash inherently is not valuable. Cash is a means of exchange. And you use cash to get something else valuable, right? So if you're selling something just so you can have a stack of cash, then I wouldn't sell it. But if you're selling something so you can get a stack of cash so you can do something with that cash, that makes more sense. That makes a lot more sense. So I don't just sell something because of the ROI. I would sell something because it has a good ROI, and I want that money to XYZ. I want that money to pay for the salaries that are coming out of my business bank account. I want that to pay for travel expenses. I want that to buy more inventory. I want that to, whatever I'm going to do with that money. If I'm just a collector, I want to use that money to buy other items that I really like, that I think the market is undervaluing right now. And I know exactly what they are. And I'm going to take that money, pocket some of it for personal reasons and to take my wife to dinner or whatever. And then I'm going to buy this other item that I think has a really good chance of going up in the future. And I really like it, right? Like that's the kind of thought process that I would go through on this. And it also goes back to that age-old question that I started the entire stream off of, which is, if I have an item that's gone up in value, and I do have a few of these that I bought long before Pokemon boom / vintage super boom, that are worth like 10x or more of what I got them 4 years ago. I have some of those. And there's just this conundrum in my head of, should I sell that and take that money and, infuse the business with more liquid to buy more collections, or hire another person, or blah, 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 all the things that you could do with money in a business? Or do I keep it because I like the item? I still have it because I like the item. And maybe what I need to realize is that there's a good chance that with all of the increase in value across the entire market and the repricing that has happened in the upward direction for all these items, that I'll never get this item again for the price that I paid originally. It just won't happen. And if I want that item long term, I should just keep the one that I have. Even though if I sold it, I make this huge percentage gain, whatever. But I actually want that item in my collection long term because I really like it. And maybe I feel like it can still go up in the future. Not guaranteed, but I'm willing to hold on to it because my downside risk is so low and my upside potential is, it continues to be high. So that's the kind of thing to think about. But yeah, great question. Thank you, Rio. We obviously didn't get to all the questions. You guys have been in the chat. Thank you so much. I want to, we're going to do more like Q&A sessions in the future. We'll have Riki come on. We'll do them together. Next week's guest, drum roll, please. We are very pleased to announce, pending everything going well and schedules making sense, that we're going to be doing another Midweek Machamps next week with our friend Derek Swanson from Swan's Emporium. I'm a huge fan of Derek. He's been grinding as a very tactical, successful reseller. I've done an episode of the Chompcast with him. We have spent a lot of time together when we're at these shows. I've learned a lot from him. He's killing it in the content game. And so we're going to have him come on and chat about some fun topics next week. It'll be me, Derek, and obviously Riki will be back. And we'll see. Maybe Riki has some big news for everybody. Thank you so much for your time, guys. Have a great night. We will see you in a week. Bye.